Hey Blocksters, welcome to the Blockchain Hustler, a show where we talk to the leading founders, creators, celebrities, and disruptors who are hustling in Web3. Today's guest is Bassy Bob Brockmann. Bob is a Grammy-winning and Oscar-nominated record producer and mixing engineer. He has collaborated with the most iconic names in the music industry, including Prince, Jay-Z, Kanye West, Mary J. Blige, Usher, Christina Aguilera, Bob Dylan, the Notorious B.I.G., the list goes on and on. Bob has had more than 30 of his productions track on the top 10 of Billboard's Hot 100. He's been nominated for over 50 Grammy Awards and has won over 25 for his mixing and production work. As an entrepreneur, Bob has started several successful startups, including Nifty Tunes, which is a Web3 application changing the value model for music. Bob, thank you so much for joining us today on the Blockchain Hustler.
Thank you so much for that illustrious intro. Wow, thank you so much.
I wanted to get to all of it because, my gosh, you've done so much and it's so incredibly impressive.
Well, I'm just getting started.
I know, that's so true. I love it. And just before we dive in, obviously you've had an incredible career up to today. Can you just tell us about your background and how your journey in the music industry led you into Web3?
Yeah, so I started out as a musician. I got a scholarship to University of Miami as a trumpet player. But when I got to University of Miami, I discovered the recording studio, and it occurred to me at that moment that that was probably going to be my life's work. And probably up until very recently, that has been my life's work, mostly being in the recording studio, making records, sometimes working on film soundtracks, that kind of stuff, mostly, within sort of the realm of, the major label world, mostly working for major labels and working on pop records, like many of the ones that you just listed at the beginning of the call. But, the thing that I was always acutely aware of, while I was working on these records, is that, like many of these records that were, creating billions of dollars of value for the major labels, the artists in many cases were broke and were in really difficult situations. And that's only really been exacerbated by the Web2 companies, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, etc., YouTube. And so, this has really gotten to a place where it's sort of a deplorable situation for music creators, where I actually just got back from London. I just spent 4 days there meeting with the DIT division of international trade for the UK government. 91% of independent artists are living under the poverty line. I would imagine that circumstances are very similar in the United States. And it's just a circumstance of really technology companies deciding that they can take whatever they want because they're unchallenged, they're monopolies. And it was a situation that was very distressing to me. And it was really probably about a year ago when I started discovering these new sort of blockchain-based tools with the NFT marketplace, where digital images were being revalued. I mean, even Beeple talks about the fact that he was selling his images for $100, 4 years ago. And now, I mean, he just did an artwork that just sold for $19 million, So when I saw that there was a revaluation of art in general, physical art and digital art, I thought that this was an opportunity to try to revalue music. And I really wanted to make that my life's work. And so Nifty Tunes was really the vehicle, I thought, to do that. And I mean, when we really started building Nifty Tunes, myself and Kush Dave, who's my co-founder of my company, and also Vanya Pestana, who's the chief marketing officer. She's also the CEO of a fantastic project called Bond Bunnies, which is sort of like going to be our flagship release once our marketplace is done. We decided that we really wanted to make the mission statement of Nifty Tunes to change the valuation of music. And if you look at just a single transaction on Nifty Tunes, like a 1 ETH sale of a piece of music merged with a piece of animation, for $3,000, a Spotify transaction is 0.003 cents. So a Nifty Tunes transaction, by default is 1 billion times the valuation of a typical streaming transaction. And we're by no means trying to bring about the demise of the record companies or even the demise of Spotify, but we are trying to provide an alternative to artists, particularly in the realm of the marketplace. So there's really two products that are our main thing. I mean, one is the mixing engine that we have, which is a consumer marketplace where you could take a piece of animation and a piece of music that's loopable and join them together and mint them. And so I think in a sense that sort of differentiates us from other marketplaces where, the music and the animation is already muxed before it's presented to a marketplace like OpenSea or Foundation or what have you. And then the one that we're actually going to be debuting this weekend at RealWorks with the Wanderers is a live minting platform where we're actually capturing moments in real time while a concert is happening and then putting them on the marketplace for the people in the audience to take home with them. And I think that that's revolutionary for a number of reasons. I mean, one is that it's a very intimate transaction directly between the artist and the fan, but also the fan is taking home something which I think is much more precious than, say, a mug or a cozy or a CD or a T-shirt, something that is actually a commodity, an NFT of the actual performance, a little segment of a song, about a 30-second segment. So in that sense, we feel like that's kind of like a win-win opportunity for a fan and an artist to sort of join together in community to create value for each other.
Right. That's so incredible. And I want to dive into what Nifty Tunes is solving and just kind of explain to people listening how it all works. Obviously, from your background working in the music industry, you first went through and just saw firsthand how basically these big labels were making all the revenue, these middlemen, and then you saw how once file sharing apps like Napster or LimeWire kind of like brought the entertainment business to its knees. And then now today, the value of artists and engineers' works just continue to decline with the streaming networks like Spotify, like you were saying. Can you just dive deeper into explaining how Nifty Tunes solves the problem of artists getting paid practically nothing just with the traditional model?
Right. So you were just talking about the middleman. The big word that I would bring into the conversation is disintermediation, which basically means removing the middleman from the transaction, from the equation. I think that this is a situation where we need really a massive PR campaign to educate music listeners and music fans about the realities of what's happening behind the scenes. Because I think that social media does a lot to push out the narrative that like everybody's blinged out in the music business. And, while that might be the case for Jay-Z, that might be the case for Beyonce, certainly partially because they write all their own material. And so they're benefiting from the royalties that come from publishing, which is not affected by the recoupment schemes of the record companies. Of course, the record companies have their own publishing companies, which they try to encourage people to sign to. So it's basically two back pockets that go into the same pair of pants, in a sense, right? Sony Records, Sony Music, Warner Brothers Records, Warner Chappell, and that's okay. I mean, they're multinational corporations, that in many ways are aggregates of 100 different companies, are part of the same general large company, and their dedication is to their board and to their shareholders and to provide the greatest value on a quarterly basis and also to expand exponentially. But there are a number of problems with that. One is the environment. It's destroying the planet, this constant expansionary kind of approach. And the other is that they're taking a majority of the revenue. In Spotify's case, it's 99.997% of the transaction, which is kind of like unthinkable at any point in history that any company would take that much of a transaction when basically all of the work and all of the labor that goes into making a record is carried by the artist. And in many cases, in most cases, for stuff that's distributed through Spotify, also all the cost is borne by the artist. So what we're trying to present is a different kind of value proposition where we're more acting as a service agent for the artist. When we're live minting at a concert, we're really helping the artist to put their works directly in the hands of the fans. And I think a lot of fans, the first reflexive thing that they do when they go to a concert is put their phone up in the air, start delivering that intellectual property to Facebook. I don't think they realize that they're giving away not only the artist's works, but their own ownership of media to a multinational corporation. And you can't take that media with you when you go. If you decide to leave Facebook or you decide to leave Instagram, it's not like you're going to take that over to a Web3 network. That's the property. That's the way the terms of service work for these multinationals. So the idea, I think, is for Nifty Tunes to really act as a facilitator for the creation of community. And I mean, it's kind of understood that like social media has done a good job of helping artists to build community. I mean, that's certainly the case. And I mean, there have been tools that artists have been able to use to scrape information to find out where people are listening to their music and go to those cities and play cities. Certainly those kind of web tools can be retooled into the web world. And I think it's important for people to understand really what the trajectory has been from Web 1 to Web 2 to now Web 3, and obviously I think this is something you probably understand clearly, like living in this world every day, that Web 3 is about community. Web 3 is about people working in concert with one another rather than trying to compete with one another and destroy each other. There's a guy, Gigamesh, who's sitting on the panel with me at Future Shape, who's the founder of Sound XYZ, which is another music platform, which is helping to bring more value to music. So I believe in the Web3 world, it's possible for a lot of boutique companies to work in concert together to try to create more value for artists, and again, through cooperation rather than through competition.
Right, absolutely. Gosh. And just as a veteran in the traditional music industry, I'm just curious what you've been seeing, like with the emergence of Web3, who is adapting and learning and embracing it, and who is staying the course. Like, are you seeing some big artists and labels embrace Web3 and then seeing some just kind of avoiding it?
Yes. It's kind of concerning. I mean, as soon as a value proposition emerges, that means more profit for a company. Obviously, like large corporations are going to be moving in that direction. So in the retail world, you see companies like Nike, really Louis Vuitton, big brands, multi-billion-dollar corporations, moving into the metaverse space. As well as the record companies. And I mean, I met with a couple representatives of the UK government that are liaisons to the entire, record company ecosystem in England. And obviously they're moving in the direction of trying to embrace Web3 protocols, because I mean, in one sense, it's much more efficient than the way things have been done in the Web 2 world. And so that potentially means more profit. And that's the case for any business, whether it's shipping or the airlines or the hotel business or any other kind of business. Putting things on the blockchain, tends to make things much more efficient and also much more transparent. So from the artist's perspective, I see things tilting towards more transparency, but of course it's concerning when you see large multinational interests that are, trillion-dollar companies potentially tilting their sword toward Web3 protocols. It makes me feel like we need to work harder and faster to build this community so that we have a unified movement. And it is a revolutionary movement. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, but I mean, that's my perspective on it. I kind of feel like everything that I've done in my whole career has been in preparation. It's sort of like a Lord of the Rings kind of thing, The whole time you were inside the record business, you didn't know that this was going to be your campaign, when you reach a certain point in your life. And I feel like this is an inflection point for me where I really need to advocate for artists. I mean, I felt like I always have in terms of my work as a producer to try to help artists to make the best sounding records they did, but I didn't feel like I had any agency to really like change things in terms of the way things were sort of baked in as far as the big companies were concerned.
Right. It's so interesting. Everything from your background has led to now, and things are aligning, and you're clearly taking a big step into this space and like taking advantage of what you know and what you're passionate about. And it's so interesting also to see just how some of these huge artists, traditional music industry artists, are like kind of slowly dipping their toes in. Obviously, like people like Snoop Dogg are big into it, but even like Kanye, you know, he made headlines when he had initially stated he was going to stay away from NFTs. He was kind of anti-NFT, and then recently filed NFT trademark applications. Do you think the tide is turning for some of these big artists as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, I think that there are, you know, also lots of use case situations in sports and music entertainment where you could see very famous people putting out NFT drops that are failing. And I think that what that really speaks to is that there is a certain expertise, and there's also a certain adoption of community standards and community ideas. And if you're not part of the Web3 community, you might not necessarily succeed in your first drop. You know, I mean, I think that there's a way in which you can be very, very successful with what you put out, but I think that it has to do with participation, and it has to do with becoming a part of the community and really making yourself known within the community, I think, to ensure that your project goes well, you know, that the drop is successful.
Right. And as far as up and coming new kind of independent artists and creatives, they're obviously kind of at a crossroads where they're trying to decide, should I take the traditional route? Should I dive into Web3? Do you think the emergence of Web3 is basically the perfect avenue for all like new music creatives to take now, as opposed to if they wanted to choose the more traditional music industry label model?
You know, it really depends on what the person wants to do with their career. I don't necessarily think that the current Web3 protocols, which are very community oriented, are necessarily the way to scale globally. I had a number of discussions when I was in London with you know, people from the major label world. You know, I think that there is value to multinational companies that are tied into also film companies and television networks, and they're all sort of joined at the hip in the same company. So in that sense, the centralization of multinational corporations can be beneficial for, you know, an artist like Billie Eilish, or, you know, or Jay-Z or Kanye. But, you know, I mean, I think that a lot of artists have been very outspoken about how much they've been cheated in their deals, even when they have very favorable terms. And that's partially because of lack of transparency, you know, because, you know, all of the remunerations and all the expenses that happen with record companies and also with film companies are happening behind the scenes in a black box. It's not like you can go on Etherscan and see like what the record companies are actually spending their money on. And in that sense, you know, it's been very rare in the last 80 to 90 years in the recording business that anybody has actually ever received a royalty check from a record company. And I think that's another thing that fans are not aware of.
Right.
That artists are not paid, and in many cases are forced into going back into the studio to make another record in order to get another advance check, which is really the only money that they'll ever get from the record company. And also that all of the debt is loaded onto their points.
Right.
So if you've got an 8-point deal with a record company and you're having to pay a $2 million debt, which you don't even really know what the accounting is for that debt that's being loaded onto you, it's an impossibility. You're basically set up for a life of debt servitude. And I think what's exciting about companies like Nifty Tunes and like Sound XYZ and other companies that have entered into the music space is that you can do a drop on a Monday and you could be paid by Monday afternoon.
Wow.
And I mean, even with the performing rights societies, you're only paid on a quarterly basis. And, they're also taking their cut off the top of all of the salaries and their expenses and their dinners and everything that they're doing with your money fundamentally before you
Right.
get paid. So I think that the important thing is agency. And I think that all artists, whether they're global stars or whether they're independent artists that are just getting started, they want to have agency and they want to be able to decide how the money is spent on their behalf. And that's much easier to see in a Web3 environment where everything is transparent, where you can, I mean, if you look at a Nifty Tunes transaction, as soon as the NFT drops, you can look it up and you can see exactly who the artists are that are participating in that particular NFT and where that money is going and what their percentages are. And that's very unusual. It's very radical in a sense.
The transparency is incredible. And working with Nifty Tunes, who are some artists that you've been working with or just inspired by, who are doing big things in Web3?
So we're still building our platform. We're probably a month or a month and a half out from release. We might actually show some of our marketplace at Future Shape this week in Denver.
Wonderful.
But I think what we've more been doing is we've been more demonstrating how NFTs can live in a live environment. So, our first festival that we went to was South by Southwest, and we had this jam session on the roof of the Speakeasy, right in downtown Austin.
So fun.
And there were a number of beat makers like E.T. Do and Wino Willie, also, Easy Mo B, who I worked with, on the Biggie Smalls records, that were generous enough to actually send me some beats that I could get started with to actually merge with the animation. So it's really more on the artist side, people that we have been working with behind the scenes to actually sort of like build up the platform and start to demonstrate how the mechanism of Nifty Tunes works. But I mean, I would say on the artist side, there is an artist named Nico, and on Instagram, I believe her handle is It's Nicolina, and she is very, very gifted singer, songwriter. I just produced a single for her called Welcome to the Club, and we're not exactly sure what the release date is on that, but we want to actually release a couple signature Bon Bunnies that Sujeta, who is the artist that's working with Vanya on the entire Bon Bunnies campaign. They've created some special celebrity characters that are going to be merged with fractional parts of Nico's first single. So there are a number of discussions that we're in right now with artists, and we've been getting more and more interest and adoption from mostly independent artists that are looking to move forward. I mean, I think it's going to be a little while before we're able to actually do any live minting with any major label artists, because the legal ramifications of trying to deal with the performing rights societies and the intellectual property issues and the copyright issues and the very, very sticky legal aspects of their recording agreements makes it very difficult to be nimble and frankly, to move quickly. And in that sense, independent artists who have independent management are much easier to deal with, because if you show them the value proposition, you show them that your split is 93% in favor of the artist and 7% to the company. That's so much more favorable than any split that any artist has ever gotten in the history of the recording industry. So I think the value proposition is there, but being able to figure out ways to loop in the major stakeholders in the major label world is going to be challenging. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it took 4 years for the deal to be done for Spotify to come into the United States. And a lot of that had to do with record companies making sure that they had an owning share of the company, which they do. They have a majority stake in Spotify. So Spotify doesn't really own Spotify in the United States. It's mostly owned by the major labels. And
Right.
for that reason, you still have the same problem with people trying to be paid in Spotify, is that the record companies are always going to get their money first, because that's the way
Right.
the deal was structured for Spotify to be able to actually come into the US.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, that's fascinating. And beyond like the transparency and just the fairness of who gets what when it comes to who gets paid, there's also in Web3 just the culture and community that is also favorable. And celebrities like Paris Hilton have been outspoken about like how exciting the Web3 space is and how inclusive the communities in Web3 are, especially compared to that of Hollywood. And coming from working in Hollywood myself, I can kind of see where she's coming from. And I just want to know from your perspective, how would you describe the Web3 culture in general and just in comparison to Hollywood as well?
I think it's really refreshing. I can understand why Paris Hilton would be attracted to this community, because I think that there's a leveling of the playing field. We're participating in spaces all the time on Twitter, which is where, a lot of the conversations and a lot of the activity is happening. And, you have like kids in the third world, in, Eastern Europe and South America, who are like putting up pictures and who are actually like selling their artworks, having conversations with hedge fund managers from New York City that are billionaires that are paying $3.31 million for one CryptoPunk,
Yeah.
And I think that there's I think that there's a certain kind of like warmth and sense of community that I've found in the spaces. I have generally found, social media to be kind of toxic, frankly, and with the with the focus on negativity and takedowns and that sort of thing. And I hope that Web3 will continue to maintain that kind of sense of sort of community spirit. I mean, I have to say it's been very, very refreshing to participate in the Twitter spaces with all these Web3 companies, because people are just cool.
Mm-hmm.
They're just easygoing. And I think that that's why we need to move fast,
Mm-hmm.
keep it that way.
So true. I know it's such a, like you said, warm and inclusive community. And it's so nice on that end, but then now we're dealing with the market. And I know the market has obviously shaken up a lot of people. How has the market downturn affected your space in Web3? And what are your predictions for the future?
I think that I think that it wasn't surprising to anybody. I think that the crypto market had peaked way too high, and I think that people were just waiting for the correction to happen. And also, everybody remembers 2017. I mean, they have seen the way these wide swings happen. I think what was surprising to me was how quick the recovery was. And I don't know that the recovery is perfect, but I mean, the fact that, ETH has gone up, 50, 60% in the last week and a half. And, we're still transacting on Ethereum until we find something that's more reliable. I mean, certainly Solana and Polygon Matic are interesting, and they're innovative because they're inexpensive on the gas side. But unfortunately, they have traffic jams, and I've had Polygon Matic transactions that took 45 minutes. So, for a company that's trying to transact and like capturing live events and being able to, let people participate while they were still in the arena, I think Ethereum is the way to go. And I'll be very interested to see what happens with the merge. I know that it's imminent, and so we'll see, what kind of effect that's going to have. Certainly, from an environmental perspective, it's going to be a huge change for Ethereum, because
Mhm.
the load on the environment and people setting up their mine farms next to coal factories is not the kind of future that I think we want for our kids. So we've got to figure out a way to be environmentally conscious and also fiscally conscious, in a sense. And I think that that's where regulation, which was certainly a lot of the topic of the roundtable that I was at in London last week, is important. And that doesn't necessarily mean constraining innovation. You really want to keep innovation open and easy for people to be able to start companies and come up with new ways of doing things. I actually think that Web3 potentially is a boon for innovation, because we're talking about relatively small companies all existing sort of in one environment. Whereas with Web 2, I think that what you ended up was with 5 or 6 big hegemons that basically destroyed the competition and keeps any other competition from ever really rising up and threatening their control of the environment. So I think that that's the future of Web 3. Hopefully, is thousands of really innovative and cool companies that are constantly innovating, because I think that the problem when you have monopolies is that they don't really have any reason to innovate.
Mm-hmm.
You see that with the power companies and the cable companies. I mean,
Right.
the cable companies, in many cases all over the United States, like, have monopolistic control, and so you still have like low speeds and high fees, and that's crony capitalism. That's not true capitalism. And true capitalism is where you have really an open marketplace and you have constant innovation. So, my hope is that we can build this community fast and large, so that we can actually go toe to toe with the big multinationals and provide a better value proposition than them.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. Wow. Oh my gosh, incredible. And I just want to follow up with what your predictions for the future of the music industry are as a whole in Web3, and just how everything will evolve in your eyes.
Oh, I mean, I think the future is really rosy for the music business. I mean, we're in a rut right now because, the streaming companies have really made it very difficult for musicians to make a living. They've engorged themselves, and they've made a lot of money off the backs of musicians. And I think now's the time to kind of put artists first before the shareholders.
Absolutely.
So, most of the companies that I see that are coming into the music space with innovations around ticketing or distribution or production or fundraising, all seem to be artist-oriented companies. At least, the ones that I've met at the last couple of festivals, NFT LA, NFT New York City. I'm very inspired by this whole new kind of crop of companies that are coming up, and I want to befriend all of them and work side by side with them on artists' behalf. So I think the future's bright.
For sure. And I know that you'll be attending, like you said, the Future Shape 360 event this weekend in Denver by Metanoise. Tell me more about what we can expect from Nifty Tunes, as far as the announcements, and you'll be speaking. What can we expect?
Yeah, I'll be on a panel with Gigamesh and Dylan Barry and Scott Page from Pink Floyd. Massive tech innovator. Definitely, he's one of the granddaddies of the Web3 world, without a doubt. So it's going to be great to be on the panel with Scott. He's also a dear friend and fellow musician. So that's going to be exciting. I see that there's a panel on women in Web3, which is equally exciting. There's some great performances. Don Diablo is playing Saturday night. Deadmau5 is playing Friday night. Cherub is playing Saturday night. And we're doing a live minting concert with Wanderers, and Wanderers will be debuting one of their new films, one of the new 5-minute films that they put together with all of their Wanderers characters. So I'm super excited about that. I'm super excited to be able to actually have a product that I can show people. It's been a long time coming to actually to create the right set of circumstances to be able to actually make this work. And everybody in my company, Kush and Vanya and Adit and Jonathan, Jack, everybody on my team has been working overtime for the last couple of months to prepare for this moment. So we're all going to be there. We're super excited about Sunday night. I think it's going to be monumental.
Gosh, the live minting is so interesting. I'm so curious to see how that all plays out and how that goes. I kind of want to know more.
I think it's a great thing for a fan to be able to take home a memory, of like your favorite artist and actually own it. The whole streaming business is, with Apple and with Spotify and with Google and like all of the major tech companies have sort of moved to renting media as opposed to owning media. I mean, I used to have a record collection. I used to have a CD collection. So
Right.
now people can have, live NFT collections of Harry Styles or, anybody that they really love. They can go to a concert and they can actually participate in owning a little bit of that event, which I think
Mhm.
is fantastic.
Oh, that's incredible. I love that so much. And before we wrap this up, so at Blockster, we highlight leaders and pioneers in Web3 who are hustling on the blockchain. And so I just want to ask you, what makes you a Blockster, also known as a blockchain hustler?
Well, I just think I'm taking all of my swag that I learned from the hip hop world, and I'm pouring all of it into this company. So we are hustling 24/7 at Nifty Tunes on artists' behalf, and I'm delighted to be a Blockster.
We're so delighted to have you. And where can everyone follow you, connect with you, keep up with everything that you're doing?
So probably the best place is at Twitter. It's at Nifty Tunes, NFTYTUNES. Please follow us. Most of the announcements about what we're doing, will definitely be on the Twitter space. We'll be evolving. We do also have a Nifty Tunes, server with Discord. And, as we get closer to our drop with Bon Bunnies, I would definitely encourage people to follow Bon Bunnies. It's an incredible project.
Wonderful. Bob, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for joining us on the Blockchain Hustler. That was truly so insightful. I really
Thank you so
appreciate
much, Kaylee. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at the conference.
it. Yes, me too. Thanks, Bob.